Henry Kissinger's probably pissed. Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Business Blaze, the only channel where you are sure that I have legs. This is what happens at Theranos. You guys have probably heard of Theranos, I know. There are like 1 billion YouTube videos about what happened at Theranos. I haven't actually seen any of them because even though I make a lot of educational videos, I don't really watch a lot of educational videos because it's too much like work. But just before we get started, I would like to say that this video is brought to you by Theranos. It's not really. Theranos seems to be a huge, massive scam. What we're gonna do is hopefully bring a little bit of Business Blaze flavor to the story. Danny has written us a script. We're going to be going through that. By the way, recently I got a new microphone and it's not a lav mic. It's like right up here. So I have to be a little bit more careful to stay in the same place. Let's crack on. During the summer of 2017, a young American businesswoman called Elizabeth Holmes was facing a tough interrogation from the Securities and Exchange Commission on who were investigating whether she had helped to organize one of the biggest and longest running frauds in the US medical industry. In response to their probing questions asked over 3 days of intense scrutiny, Holmes rarely seemed to have any detailed or remotely useful answers, which is a bit of a shame bearing in mind that she was the founder and CEO of Theranos, the company accused of a massive billion-dollar swindle. It's like, yeah, you get arrested by the Security and Exchange Commission. They're like, we need to have a talk to you. What's going on in your company? Dunno. Absolutely no idea. Just seems to be this way, doesn't it? I'm pleading the fifth. I have no idea what that means. And in fact, she replied with the words, I don't know, over 600 times during the course of her investigation. It was a far cry from a few years earlier when Elizabeth Holmes had been happy to rabbit on at length to the world's media as she basked in the glory of becoming the youngest ever female self-made billionaire and hung out with some of the most famous faces on the planet. So, how did she get to the point that she could now be facing 20 years in prison, and what exactly was going on behind the scenes at Theranos? I always think, like, 20 years, I'm pretty sure if you murder someone in the UK, you're probably gonna go away for, like, maybe a decade, maybe 2. I love when in America, or I guess, like, for corporate crimes, it'll be like, yeah, if you do enough of it, you're gonna go away forever. I know that she's bad and dangerous and stuff, but can't we just like put her in a house for the rest of her life? I mean, it's not gonna be nice. All of her money got taken away. She's gonna have a bad time. She can make YouTube videos. More importantly, is it true that the alleged big-time fraudster fakes her super deep voice to make herself appear more credible? You know, I've seen pictures of her, but I don't think I've ever heard her talk.
And I'm basically in the office.
She does have a super deep voice. It's a little bit weird. Simon, don't discriminate against people with weird voices, says everyone in the comments.
It was nothing. Good day.
Wait, that bit might not be so important, and we don't find out the answer for sure. Still, it would be dead weird if it turns out that she did. Maybe not quite as weird as Simon disguising his broad Yorkshire accent in all these bloody videos, though. It is true. The amount of emails I get, or like comments, is that how you really speak? It's like, yes. Although my nan was from Yorkshire, but she lived in the south, I think, since she was young, and she didn't sound like she was from Yorkshire anymore, but she was cheap like she was from Yorkshire. She would make a cup of tea and then take the tea bag out and put it to the side so she could use that same tea bag in a cup of tea later. Before we turn our own scrutinous gaze onto Theranos, we need to first consider the pain and hassle of a typical blood test. You usually need to make an appointment at the doctor's surgery and then go to wait in a room full of horribly diseased people until it's your turn to get called into the nightmare room. A doctor or nurse will then pull out a needle long enough to make you shriek in blind fear and draw out several vials of blood required to run multiple tests. I remember the first time I ever did a blood test, I go into the room and he's right about the diseased people. Like, don't go to hospital because if you're not sick, they will make you sick. And I'm like there, and the nurse or whoever's taking the blood out, and I'm just staring at it. And she's like, you really want to look at it? And I'm like, yeah, I'm curious. I don't know, it doesn't really bother me. It hurts, it often costs a small fortune, and it can take days or even weeks of agonizing waiting until you get the results back from the lab. I've never paid for this, and Danny, you're British as well. You've never paid for this either. The Silicon Valley startup Theranos planned to change all of that forever. The company had come up with something called the Edison machine, which was perhaps quite appropriately named after the famous inventor who didn't really invent the light bulb, but was happy to take the credit. The device itself didn't look that impressive. In fact, it looked a bit like a typical bread maker. It looked like this. The idea behind the Edison machine was that it could deliver quick and accurate results from the tiniest prick of blood taken from your fingertips. I know already that this didn't work. So can you imagine it's just like, No, it is just a bread maker. Why does this blood machine have a sourdough setting? And I am joking, obviously, but the amount of due diligence done really does feel like, as we'll discover, that could have been the level of due diligence done. So now you wouldn't even have to make a doctor's appointment for a blood test. Instead, you could just pop into your local Walgreens pharmacy and get a tiny raindrop-sized sample of blood taken from your finger, which would then be put through an Edison machine for analysis. The results would come back in hours rather than weeks. The whole process was easy, painless, and cheap. The device was set to revolutionize the $75 billion a year blood testing industry, and Theranos quickly courted the keen attention of the media and big league investors. Well, of course it did, because it's like, I've invented a miracle machine. It's like, I've invented hover boots. It's like, of course you'd attract investment, because you just made some shit up that's incredible. The idea was first dreamed up in 2003 by then 19-year-old Elizabeth Holmes, who was studying, oh, she's really young. She's even young now, she's like 35? My math sucks. Who was studying chemical engineering at Stanford University at the time. Partially inspired by her own phobia of needles, Holmes dropped out of university to launch the company that was going to develop a new technological solution for reaping vast amounts of data from just the tiniest bit of blood. Perhaps a few alarm bells should have started ringing when she pitched the idea to expert medicine professors who told her that what she was trying to do is impossible. It's like, guys, I've invented this magical machine. That's impossible. It's impossible. She's like, no, I really invented it. Okay. But refusing to be swayed by anything as trivial as science or hard facts, those bastards, Holmes preserved with her business venture. And to be fair, the development of the Edison machine seemed to translate into roaring financial success for the Theranos company. By the year 2013, Theranos had partnered with Walgreens to offer new blood tests in 40 stores across the US. So this thing actually rolled out. I didn't realize that this actually got into stores. I thought that she had invented some fake machine, told people it was amazing, got a bunch of investment, but this thing was being used. As we find out, it didn't do anything. Much bigger deal was on the cards with Safeway, who were planning to launch 800 new blood test clinics in their stores, although this eventually fell through due to mysterious missed deadlines and questionable results from Theranos. By this time, Theranos had raised a total of $700 million in investment, and the company at its peak had a value of $10 billion. That's insane. It's just a bread maker. It's a fake blood machine. Big name investors such as Rupert Murdoch, the Waltons family, the founders of Walmart, and not, as I originally thought, the characters from the 70s TV series, and the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos. The Secretary of Health was like, that thing's fake. The Secretary of Education got involved, though. The company also received support and endorsement from the likes of Hillary Clinton and Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger, one of those people who is actually still alive. Chuck Yeager, also up there. People who you think are dead, but are still alive. At least as of now, they're really old. Google Ventures was originally keen to make... Another thing I really like to do is I watch old episodes of TV shows. So I've recently been watching Star Trek The Next Generation from the 90s. And it's really morbid, but when I see an old actor on the screen, I'll look up to see if they're alive or dead. And there was one guy who must have been 80. And I was like, I don't even need to look this up, but he's dead. Because this was filmed in 1991. The dude was 108. I was like, holy okay. I don't know why I do that. It's really weird. Google Ventures was originally keen to make a substantial investment too, but they got a bit confused when they dispatched one of their team to take the legendary pinprick blood test, and he returns with the news that several large vials of blood had been drawn from his arm. When Google Ventures then attempted to perform due diligence on the company, Theranos suddenly stopped returning to their calls. I like to imagine that they discovered the sourdough function. Too right. It's all very well having one of the biggest companies in the world offering to pump millions of dollars into your business, but who's got the time to answer a bunch of stupid questions? Apparently though, plenty of investors were just totally fine. Henry Kissinger was like, no, I don't need you to answer any questions. It's fine. Hillary Clinton, she's like, no, that looks good. Looks good. I'll put some money in. Bill's money. Elizabeth Holmes didn't need silly old Google anyway. Apparently not, honestly. She had now been officially recognized by Forbes as the world's youngest female self-made billionaire and had made it onto Time magazine's list of the most influential people in the world. Interesting. So she was the world's youngest female self-made billionaire, which I think was just taken over by that one of the Kardashian sisters. He was 19 when she became a billionaire, but also self-made billionaire. And I'm like, Forbes, you need to redefine what you mean by self-made. I just got a small loan of $1 million. She'd also been named Business Person of the Year by Fortune, Woman of the Year by Glamour, and had become the youngest person in history to win the prestigious Horatio Alger Award for Outstanding Americans. She was not outstanding. But there's just one small problem with all of this. The Edison machine didn't work at all. Following a devastating expose in the Wall Street Journal, it was revealed that the Edison machine was rarely used for blood test analysis. The lab teams instead used much older traditional technology to analyze these tiny samples of blood, and the results would often conflict wildly with other independent tests, which had used amounts of blood that you actually needed to do this kind of thing right. Okay, I didn't even realize this. I thought the machine did it. It just did it incredibly badly, and the data was just completely it just wasn't accurate at all. But so they weren't even actually doing it. They were trying to do the traditional tests on tiny samples of blood, which doesn't work. So the machine did nothing except essentially take a pinprick. So essentially, she didn't invent a bread maker, she invented a pin. So Theranos was essentially just taking uselessly small samples of blood, analyzing them with old machines that were designed to work with much larger samples of blood, and delivering the worthless results back to the customer. All this time, the mighty Edison machines were just gathering dust in the corner, silently wishing to themselves that they had a bread-making function. At the time of making this video, Elizabeth Holmes is still facing trial, and so it may be a while before we get all the solid facts of what was going on behind the scenes at Theranos. She's just gonna be like, I don't know, no idea, it's mystery to me. She'll be like 19 years into her jail sentence. What's Theranos? Who am I? It's hard to say for sure whether she was genuinely hoping to battle through these teething problems with the Edison machine, or if she was purposefully participating in a massive fraud from the very start. Get through the teething problems, like talking to her team like, guys, how are we gonna turn this bread maker into a magical blood machine? It's impossible, Liz, we can't. Get it done. Sorry, get it done, guys. Get it done. There was certainly a lot of other dodgy stuff going on too. In 2014, Elizabeth Holmes was claiming to potential investors that the company was generating an annual revenue of $100 million, which was a little wide of the mark. And okay, by a little wide of the mark, I mean 1,000 times wide of the mark. As in the true figure was $100,000. This would be like me saying, I've invented a magical cup. It's magical. And I've sold billions of them. Buy one too. And there's just absolutely no truth in it whatsoever. Can't believe I left my coffee over there for the whole recording of this video and now it's cold. Also, this video probably wasn't as good so far because I'm not infused with the power of the three wolves. Holmes herself appeared to have extremely limited knowledge of how Theranos technology worked, as illustrated by the way she answered with the words, I don't know, over 600 times during the investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission. It's widely believed that she wasn't just trying to dodge the awkward questions here, she genuinely had no idea. The trouble is that neither did anybody else on the company board. The board was largely made up of former corporate leaders, former government officials, and even former military leaders. Just 2 members of the board had graduated from medical school, which is a troubling setup for a company rooted in medical technology. Yeah, no it appeared as if the company was more geared toward making influential connections and raising investment than it ever was in creating a product that might have actually worked on some level. Definitely don't feel like that's a unique thing in Silicon Valley. Like, what are we making? Well, we're making an app. What does it do? I don't know, but we raised like 10 mil, baby. Holmes apparently liked to style herself on Steve Jobs, but it appeared that she spent more time copying his preference for black turtlenecks than any effective style of leadership. Theranos was a dysfunctional working environment built from the bricks of paranoia. Very few people got close to Holmes's inner circle, and employees working in different departments of the company were forbidden to talk to each other. There's one department of the company which are just like stripping down bread makers into magical Theranos machines, and another department like raising capital. There's no science department. It's probably good they don't talk and have lunch. Any concerns from employees about the blood tests were not being up to scratch were met with derision and mockery from management. One of the very few team members to get close to the inner circle was called Balto. I made a video about Balto the dog. I'm betting this is her dog. He probably had one of the highest level access passes in the whole building, and he was allowed to just roam freely about the offices and do his business wherever he liked. The trouble was that he was a Siberian husky belonging to Holmes, and he probably wouldn't make the best witness in court. I know it's not very important in the grand scheme of things, but I just wanted to quickly come back to that super deep voice of Elizabeth Holmes. A professor at Stanford University recalls that Holmes spoke with a much more natural and higher-pitched voice when she was studying there in her late teens, and he was confused when he met up with her a few years later and discovered that she had adopted this new deep baritone. It's also alleged that recent video footage exists of Elizabeth Holmes slipping into a much higher pitch after she's enjoyed a few drinks. Can you imagine her saying, yeah, we're really serious about getting this investment. We've raised billions of dollars. Theranos is massively successful. But a few drinks later, it's just a bread machine. Holmes' family and old school friends have denied that she's faking the voice, and I suppose it's possible that lots of people just go a bit squeakier after a few drinks. You should hear Simon after he's been at the Baby Champ. I had to look up what Baby Champ was. It's like less alcoholic champagne. I had no idea what this was. Because I'm a real man. I drink champagne. Once someone did like a flex on my Facebook. They were like drinking Moët champagne or whatever, and they posted like feeling like James Bond. And at the bottom of the bottle it said rosé, and I just comment, James Bond doesn't drink rosé. But it still casts further suspicion on whether Elizabeth Holmes may have been trying to construct a fake persona around a fake business model. Theranos officially ceased trading in 2018, although many of Holmes' legal battles were settled behind closed doors. The Walgreens pharmacy chain had cancelled its contract with Theranos and sued the company for breach of contract. Theranos settled out of court, but it's believed that the figure was much lower than the $140 million that Walgreens were seeking. Everyone's gonna come after her for money, and the only thing she's done is spend money and not make money. So yeah, they're not getting that all back, guys. Henry Kissinger's probably pissed. Following this investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission, Holmes was fined $500,000 and banned from being an officer or a director of any company for 10 years. Now that doesn't sound so bad, but she'll also face like 20 years in prison. On top of that, I'd be like, cool, yeah, I won't do any more companies, and you can take $500,000 of money that's not really mine. Or just like, I'll find that, guys. Just don't send me to jail, please. Meanwhile, Forbes noted that Holmes' personal worth has plummeted from billions of dollars to almost zero, and stripped her of the title the world's youngest female self-made billionaire, which they gave to like, the Kardashian woman. It wasn't all bad news though. To make up for it, Forbes put Holmes on the coveted list of world's most disappointing leaders. Not sure if you get a trophy or anything for that one. On a more serious note, Elizabeth Holmes will face trial in 2020 for 9 counts of conspiracy and fraud charges, which could potentially lead to a 20-year prison sentence. That is serious. It's estimated that investors lost a total of around $700 million in Theranos, but they should perhaps at least take some of the blame and responsibility for a scandal which caused great damage to the medical industry and resulted in hundreds of thousands of people being given inaccurate blood results. Yeah, that's true. I didn't even think about that. All those people. Yeah, that kind of sucks. With a few notable exceptions such as Google Ventures and Safeway, very few potential investors seemed to bother taking the time to check out the technology or the business model. Instead, they got carried away with what appeared to be a good news story about a young female version of Steve Jobs shaking up the medical industry forever. It might have been a shrewder move to check that the Edison machines actually worked before pumping millions of dollars into what now looks to be one of the biggest fraud operations in history. That is an incredible story. I am super interested to see how this goes this year, 2020. Maybe we can do a follow-up at some point. This was Business Blaze. Thank you, Danny, for putting that together. If you enjoyed it, smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you next time.